of you who don't know much about us, we are a blue economy development center and hub. And when I'm talking about the blue economy, it's things like aquaculture, where you can grow seaweed at scale and extract food and fuel and pharmaceuticals and industrial materials. We're talking about wave energy, harnessing clean, renewable energy from our waves and tidal flows. We're talking about underwater robotics and learning all about our ocean and the ocean floor out here and our critters in the ocean. We're talking about port decarbonization, which those of you that live near the port, I'm sure you care about. Come on down, everybody in the back there. Come on down, grab a seat. Things that we're going to talk about today, as a matter of fact, how to electrify diesel equipment and otherwise reduce emissions in the port. So anything to do with the blue or sustainable ocean economy is what we're focused on here. And we're a nonprofit. We were given this amazing property, and I say given with a little air quotes around it, by the Port of Los Angeles, because I mentioned sort of air quotes, because we had to raise the $50 million to renovate these 110-year-old warehouses into this modern blue economy campus that you see today. And it's exciting. We just finished all of our renovation, the nice roll-up doors, getting the lead paint out of the roof and all that kind of thing, putting these glass doors on signal streets so each one of our partners can have their own entrance as needed and demise their space as they like. And we're now starting to get many of our partners moving in. As you can see, Beneficial State Bank is right there. On the other side of the bank, there's kind of a boxy-looking structure that's going to be a research lab for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So all of their exotic species, all of their enforcement division will have a lab there and share the information with the public. On the other side of that, there's another lab that all of our partners on site can use. We've got Ocean Well there, which is a company that's researching deep water ocean desalination, which is really novel because if you know about desalination on the coast, it uses a lot of power to suck in the water and desalinate it. And then, sure, you get fresh water, but there's a very toxic brine that then gets dumped into the near shore. Not so good. So using a lot of energy and having a toxic discharge. Well, this company has an idea to do this at great depth, thousands of feet down, where the pressure of the ocean pushes the water through the membrane to make the fresh water, so you don't need the energy to make the fresh water. Then you do need some to pump it to shore, but the brine is at such depth that it can dissipate easily and harmlessly. There's other companies that are not using brine discharge, using the power of the sun, basically distillation to make fresh water, and then they can turn that brine on land into very high quality salt. Industrial salt as well as table salt. So anyway, a lot of innovation happening here every day, and I've been sort of vamping so everyone will come down and take a seat. Now you know about AltaSea, and you'll learn more if you go talk to our folks right over there. Angie Wave, right? That's our table there with some of our great merchandise, these great caps. You too could support this great nonprofit and all of our mission. Which includes education, by the way. It's not just for these businesses to have a place to develop their products and meet with stakeholders and partners, but it's also K through 12 kids. We're going to have over 4,000 student field trips here this year, and probably much more than that next year because we're growing very fast. So kids learn that this is an ocean planet. 70% of the planet is ocean. And then we work with all of our state community colleges on workforce training because the blue economy is going to need a very different workforce. You know, it's great to have people like ABC Solar. Wave back there. There's ABC Solar, who's helping us put solar and electrify things in the port. But if you have wave energy, you're going to need solar installers, clean energy installers that know how to work in the ocean. So these are very different jobs, and we work with the community colleges on certificate programs so young people can get these great AI-proof jobs in the future. So that's a little bit about AltaSea. Again, please consider volunteering. We've got the volunteer desk over there. Trish, down, wave. Yep, that's good. There's our team over there. And that reminds me that I want to say thank you to the staff who put all this together, but also to our amazing ocean ambassadors, our volunteers who come and help us here every single day, not just on open house days. So please give a round of applause to the staff and the volunteers. And I think today we are joined by, or we were going to be joined by, LA Harbor Commissioner Lee Williams. Is Lee here? Don't see him yet? Okay, and Sean Kearns, who represents Congresswoman Barragan's office, was going to be here. Is he here? All right, well, we'll give them a shout out if they show up, because you'll want to buttonhole them to learn more about what they do. But in the meantime, we would like to acknowledge that the land we're standing on didn't always have 100-year-old warehouses. In fact, the people whose history is here would probably laugh at only 100 years, really? But for us, that's a long time. So right now, we'd like to acknowledge the ancestors on this land. Dominic Robles. Dominic, where are you? Oh, there he is. Come on up, Dominic.
Cherry, everybody. Good morning. My name is Dominic Robles, and I'm here to acknowledge the land that we are currently sitting on. I'm a member of the Tongva, and what we are is the indigenous people of the LA and Orange County area, including the Southern Channel Islands, Catalina Island, known as Pimu to us. I'm also a proud member of the Traditional Council of Pimu, the Tiat Society, and this beautiful lash canoe you see before you. I'm here and I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One is the physical location of this facility itself. Now, we would use the Tiat to convey goods, services, people, what have you, from the island here to our village, Huhuilpit, right up the road. So this area was a change point. This was a point of flux where journeys would begin and end between information, materials, island to here. And I like that. I've always been in this whole thing of change, of magic things happening where water turns to vapor. Vapor condenses to liquid. This whole change is beautiful. And that got me thinking about the function of the Tiat. Yes, we had soapstone, we had furs, we go through, simple, on paper, but really what the precious cargo was the people's intellect, their concepts, the material sciences. And in that, AltaSea and the Tiat are twins. They convey people that shouldn't really be there at the moment. Materials that I wouldn't have known of. Techniques that just didn't come to mind until you got together in that gray area, in that flux. We have a Stone Age society next to a vehicle that sees thousands of PSI on its skin at any given time during its function. We shouldn't be in that, yet here we are. And we're all here on this journey. And those journeys end and begin, and the beautiful things happen at that flux point. And it's rare that we recognize we're in that gray area. And here we are in that gray area, everybody. And as a person, personally, as an ambassador, and as a tribal member, I want to say thank you to AltaSea, and we're very excited to go on this journey together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. And by the way, very exciting. It is interesting to see the juxtaposition. The Ocean Exploration Trust, Bob Ballard, who found the Titanic, all of his modern gear that he designs here and then sends out to find more Titanics, right opposite the original ocean explorers. And interesting, since we're going to be talking about port decarbonization today and hydrogen and things like that, they are the original decarbonized transportation. So let's hear it again for Dominic and the Tiat Society. We're excited that we're going to be giving some space to the Tiat Society for a woodworking shop to teach those amazing ancient techniques to the next generation. So you'll see more Tiats, you'll see more folks around here preserving that culture. Well, it's really exciting today to be talking more about hydrogen. Those of you that know me know I'll go on and on and on about it. So at some point, somebody just, give me the hook. But before I bring up our panel to talk about hydrogen and the maritime economy, and particularly what we're doing here with it, I want to give you an example. You wonder, why is this bucket up here? Well, imagine this is 2 gallons. Imagine there was 2 gallons of water in here. And now imagine that there was 2 gallons of gasoline in here. How far would your car go on the 2 gallons of gasoline? So if your car's 30 miles a gallon, you'd go about 60 miles on this bucket of gasoline, right? Well, imagine that this was water, as I said. There's enough hydrogen, remember water is H2O, hydrogen. There's enough hydrogen in that water that if you extracted it, you could power your car the same distance it would go
on 2 gallons of gasoline. So in other words, 2 gallons of water could power your car the same distance it would go on gasoline. And you might say to yourself, okay, well, that's exciting. We're going to hear a lot of uses for hydrogen today. But, we've either got to make it from fossil fuels, which we're not wild about continuing to be dependent on that, or we have to run a little electricity through water to break the hydrogen out of the water. And, we're short of electricity all the time, and especially with AI data centers demanding more, where are we going to get the electricity? And for that matter, we live in a desert. Where are we going to get the water? So before we get into the conversation about how we're going to use it, let me just share this with you. The sewage treatment plants in Los Angeles County dump 1 billion gallons of treated fresh water a day into the Pacific Ocean. Spend a lot of money to clean it up and pump it 7 miles offshore and dump it into the ocean. That's enough water to power the entire United States transportation fleet if you took the hydrogen out of it instead of throwing it away. And you might say, okay, well, that's where the water could come from, Terry, but where's the electricity going to come from to break the hydrogen out of the water, the H2O? Well, all of the wind power in California, there's a great deal of it every night. The wind is blowing, and nobody needs that electricity. So the independent system operator either literally zaps it into the ground and wastes it, or pays other states to take it. You could take that stranded asset, that curtailed renewable, and now we're even having more solar at times of the year than we can store or use. You could take those curtailed renewables and electrolyze the wastewater, and you could get a lot of hydrogen out of that water that we're throwing away every day. So there's no limit to how we can get great hydrogen. And so when you hear today about all the applications, and sure, there's challenges, there's a lot of things we have to do to have its benefits, but think about that every time you take a shower, flush the toilet, that could be our transportation future. So with that, let me bring up Nermina, Matt, and Brian. Where are you guys? Come on up. Give them a great big hand as they come up. Take a seat. I'll put my prop to the side. Brian's taking the long way around. All right. All right. Well, we've got a great panel here to talk about hydrogen, particularly here in the transportation and maritime economy, and I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and give just a brief summary of what is it that you do with hydrogen in your work every day. So we'll start with you, Matt.
Great. Thanks, Terry, for putting this on, and the AltaSea team for another great event. These conversations are absolutely invaluable. Matt Dickinson, I'm Sustainability Director at Phoenix Marine Services, and about, 2019, I had my first professional experience since the Navy with hydrogen, and we tested the first hydrogen yard tractor deployed in the port environment, and we knew it was going to have a lot of issues because it was just kind of an ad hoc, throw it together. What I was looking for was how much hydrogen did it consume over a period of time, and then I wanted to extrapolate the economic data and compare it against fossil fuel. And what I learned during that process is A, it works to move equipment around the terminal, and B, if that cost dynamic ever came into parity with diesel fuel, i.e. a kilogram of hydrogen is roughly the cost of a gallon of diesel fuel, it would create the kind of value that would be difficult for any enterprise to ignore. So that made me pretty excited. And then I started going down this pathway of how can we incorporate this into our plans to achieve our goals for cleaning up our environment. And what I learned is, there's no limit. I've converted a couple of diesel machines to now hydrogen fuel cell powered machines. We literally ripped the diesel engine out. Toyota was nice enough to give me some fuel cells, and off we went. And that's proven to be a asset that, until a hydrogen supply dried up, people were like, hey, can we convert our machines to that? Because that thing's really running great. And the labor loved it. There was so much upside to it. And now it's parked. It's been parked for about 3 months because we can't get hydrogen for it right now. So more to follow.
Great, thank you. And my partner in travel to to Europe, Nermina from LADWP, go ahead.
Testing, okay, it works. Thank you, Terry. My name is Nermina Rucic O'Neill, and I'm Director of Generation and Capital Projects for LADWP, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. By background, I'm a mechanical engineer and very passionate about machines and also environment. I joined DWP 24 years ago as design engineer, and now I am running the capital projects in LADWP. Maybe you have heard about Scarego Generating Station, that it's going to be modernizing our fossil fuel to hydrogen generation. And also I have a capital project that is going to be removing utilization of ocean water to cool our thermal power plants and utilizing recycled water, like Terry mentioned, because we're wasting it. And instead of damaging the oceans with overheating eggs that we pulled in for cooling system, we can really translate that in technology that utilize the recycled water. So a lot of exciting projects, but going back to main topic of hydrogen, how did I get involved? With my knowledge of generation system, in around 2021, LADWP finished LA100 study with Department of Energy. And the purpose of the study was to determine how we as utility will transform so that we can become 100% renewable utility and be also reliable and affordable. The study took 2 years. There was a lot of PhDs from NREL that modeled. And sure enough, you could run utility system utilizing solar, but you need batteries. You also can have a local solar, demand response. It's compilation of different clean technologies, wind, geothermal, nuclear. But what's also important to understand that power system needs to have something that's called dispatchable generation. Solar, wind depend on the weather. You also have the sources of humanly controlled generation. And the way that LA system is built, it's built around the oceans, like I mentioned. The plants are near the oceans. So they are kind of on a cul-de-sac, and if our transmission imports of renewable for some reason due to catastrophe like a wildfire gets cut off, we cannot import that power, we will not have enough for city to sustain. So looking at how we maintain that dispatchability still, but divest from fossil fuel, working with the NREL solution was renewable fuels such as hydrogen. But why hydrogen? Because when we are going to expand on all this solar, you're going to have over generation. You're not going to need that much solar during the day, but you're not going to have it at night. Yes, you're going to have batteries, but they're only 4 hours or maybe 8. So what happens in the cases that you need it for 3 days, for example? So we are looking at hydrogen as something called long duration storage. And with all this over generation of wind and solar, instead of throwing it away, cutting it off, curtailing it, or selling it somewhere else, we can utilize it here in California to produce the hydrogen for transportation and also for power generation. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And when we were in Croatia, as I alluded to before, it was interesting how many people were interested in hydrogen over there too. So it's not just here. So now let's talk to Brian and learn a little bit about Energy Independence Now and your take on hydrogen.
Hi, I'm Brian Goldstein. I'm Executive Director of an environmental nonprofit organization named Energy Independence Now, which was founded by Terry about 25 years ago to help kind of facilitate the commercialization of hydrogen technology. And essentially what that means is that we work in between industry and government to try to kind of break down some of the obstacles or challenges to adoption and kind of reaching economies of scale so that the technology is cheap enough for the free market basically to adopt it. And, you know, essentially, like any technology cycle, very early on, the technology is very expensive. And so, we need some sort of incentives to try to get people to adopt the technology and to try to get other people to help develop the technology, put the money and time and effort and people hours into developing the tech. And so very early on, Energy Independence Now worked with Terry to develop the California Hydrogen Highway Initiative for Governor Schwarzenegger, which was adopted on Earth Day 2004. So 22 short years ago, we adopted the California Hydrogen Highway Initiative, and that led to funding and ultimately the first network of publicly accessible hydrogen refueling stations in the world. Now, we wished it had evolved faster, and we wish there are more cars on the road now, which is essentially my job to keep pushing this technology forward. But when you kind of stop for a second and look at that accomplishment in and of itself, there was literally, there were no hydrogen fuel cell vehicles that a consumer could walk into a dealership and buy or lease and drive out of there, using zero emissions with hydrogen fuel and hydrogen fuel cells. And there were certainly no stations, no publicly accessible stations anywhere in the world where a consumer could drive up and slide a credit card and buy hydrogen out of a dispenser to refuel one of these vehicles. And the fact that we have accomplished that over the last 20 years, that there are thousands of these cars on the streets right now, and it's a worldwide effort right now. There are hydrogen stations all over the planet, but it all started here in California, and to date I think California still has the most vehicles on the road. We no longer have the most stations, but that's good. We want to create this kind of mandate, this competition, so to speak, for other countries and other economies to adopt this technology and to help build it up to the point where the market can take it on its own. So over the years, that's expanded well beyond transportation. Initially, it was light duty to heavy duty trucking, which is a big issue we'll talk about here at the port. Then to heavy industrial decarbonization, where can we replace fossil fuels with hydrogen to do things like, refining oil until we don't need oil anymore? Or how can we use hydrogen to store some of the curtailed energy that Terry was talking about? We are curtailing so much electricity here. It's enough by far to power every single vehicle in the state. And I think, Terry, you were saying every vehicle in the country at that point. And this is just energy that we're wasting here in California. And candidly, there's just not enough lithium and nickel and cobalt on the planet to produce enough batteries for the entire world to go zero emission on wind and solar alone. We have to have other storage technologies, and hydrogen creates a very compelling storage medium for energy, period, but certainly for renewable energy that we can then return to the grid when we need it. And as Terry mentioned, we seem to be needing more and more of it in a world where we were hoping to need less of it, but here we are in kind of an advanced AI age where now we're going to need a ton of electricity, and we have these challenges in front of us, and we have the technology to kind of meet the challenge. Now all we have to do is kind of put those two things together and create this system. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I'll hand it back to Terry.
Exactly. And as later on when you are wandering around here, you can see the hydrogen exhibit back over there, and you'll see a Toyota Mirai regular passenger car on its side, so you can look underneath and you can see the caramel-colored tank, cylindrical tank that holds gaseous hydrogen, so hydrogen is a gas, so under pressure, and just kind of like your barbecue, if you have a LPG barbecue and then you go get your tank refilled and that type of thing. Same thing there. The hydrogen on board is converted to electricity by a fuel cell, which you'll see, and then that powers a motor that's exactly like a Tesla or any other battery car. It's important to understand the difference between when you hear about battery cars as being electric and somehow hydrogen is not. No, they're both electric vehicles, but one is powered by batteries, which take quite a while to charge and have a lot of weight, so that makes the vehicle a little less efficient. And the other, hydrogen, is a tank of a gas, and you can refuel it in the same time as you refuel your gasoline car. So with that in mind, and then by the way, there's some also exhibits there about how that automotive technology will be translated into the kinds of things that Matt will talk about. So Matt, let's talk about that comparison between battery electric, because I think you've got some battery electric equipment there, and your lessons are probably the same as people who might be considering a hydrogen car or a battery car. By the way, I have a Honda right out here if you want to see it that's hydrogen powered. And so talk a little bit about those comparisons and what are the barriers to, you mentioned price of the hydrogen itself, but what are the other barriers to having more of both? We need both. And you're going to hear us bashing batteries, but we're not really. We're just saying hydrogen has its role, as do batteries. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Terry. Yeah, great question. And you know, when you compare and contrast the different technologies, just going in, I don't have a favorite technology, okay? Well, maybe nuclear, but we won't talk about that. I'm here to solve the problem, right? And I believe the problem requires an and, not an or. The problem is infinitely more complicated than I give it credit for. Now, when I think about batteries on a terminal, the things that scare me the most are probably things that no one's really thought about unless you operate a terminal. I've been on the terminal I currently work for almost 7 years now. And in that 7 years, we've relocated the place where the equipment is stored 5 different times. And that happens when the cargo mix changes. You start to handle different types of cargo, you have to reconfigure your container terminal. Once you put charging infrastructure in the ground, you're stuck with your configuration unless you're okay with digging it up, waiting 3 years to get the permitting done, and moving them. So that scares me. We haven't done that yet, but the thing is that when you plan a terminal, you need to know for sure that you're going to locate the equipment in the location that is optimized for your operation. And the problem with that is nobody can predict the future. So I like battery electric for yard tractors. Everything else is, hydrogen is much better suited for the application. For example, the biggest battery you can get on a top handler right now today, which is one of those big forklifts that lifts containers 6 stories into the sky, 45 tons all day. Biggest battery you can get is a megawatt. Now, because I put fuel cells in a top handler and tracked it and collected all the data, I know that if you deploy a top handler on my terminal in the rail operation, in 6 hours, it's going to consume 1.7 megawatts of power. So now I have a duty cycle mismatch. I don't have an asset that can give me a full shift without being recharged. And the kind of charging required for a top handler with a megawatt battery is not your level 2 charger. It is the kind that probably costs several $100,000 and will take you at least several hours to charge. The other thing that makes this less attractive is a battery electric machine costs twice what a diesel machine would cost. So at Phoenix, we kind of split the difference. I like the circularity of repurposing the existing equipment because what normally happens is a company like mine, when they get rid of an old asset, they sell it off to another market, typically South America, where I would imagine, I can't say for sure, but this is what I would do if I was there, rip all the emissions equipment off of it and operate it for the next 15, 20 years. And that doesn't sit well with us. So what we endeavor to do is to take these machines that have hit their high hour mark and repower them with zero emissions technology. And that's the first one that we did was a hydrogen fuel cell repower. And interestingly enough, when you look at the Mirai over there and see the fuel cell, that same fuel cell we used in a giant machine on a container terminal, and that same fuel cell was lifting 45-ton containers 6 stories into the sky for 20 hours a day without any problems. So it can be done, but those are sort of the compare and contrast. Like anything that is a high intensity asset, rubber tire gantry cranes, top handlers. Those two are perfect for the hydrogen molecule. The other thing where I think if Terry said, here's a briefcase full of money, Matt, I want you to bet on where you think hydrogen is going to be deployed at scale first in the Port of LA. And my bet would be stationary power. I think that we're facing a time horizon of mismatched let's say realizations, all right? The power will be available for the terminal at a certain point in time. We have currently this much power. we're going to electrify our operation. Where are we going to get the power in that gap? So we are looking at deployable behind the meter, mainly natural gas and hydrogen capable assets. We prefer hydrogen, obviously, but until the supply side has gotten out of the chicken egg doom loop, we'll be making our own, I guess.
Nermina, let me ask you a little bit about something that I'm sure everybody wonders. Obviously, we're trying to replace diesel with zero emission, and there's two ways, whether it's in transportation or in power production, to use hydrogen. One is to combust it. You could combust it in your internal combustion engine. It does work, and is obviously cleaner than the fossil fuels. And you can run it through a fuel cell, as you've heard, which is about 2.5 times more efficient, because now instead of burning it and all of the friction and heat that comes with your engine in your car, you're powering an electric motor that's much more efficient. So you're getting more work out of the same kilogram of hydrogen. When it comes to power production, talk a little bit about your approach to that, or DWP's approach to using hydrogen. Are there emissions from the transition to a hydrogen power plant? And where will you get the hydrogen? Because obviously we're talking about, my car takes 3 or 4 kilograms. I think a large 18-wheeler truck might take, what, Brian, 100, 200, a tank of 200 kilograms. The yard equipment you're talking about, probably 75 kilograms. But you're going to be using tons or thousands of kilograms. So talk again about emissions and sources of getting the hydrogen in the future.
Sure. So starting with the utilization of the hydrogen in power production, like Terry said, it could be utilized in traditional combustion turbines or as a fuel cell. However, for the utility scale, and we did conduct a study, a very extensive study with the Department of Energy, could we implement in Los Angeles replacement of our generators, generating fossil fuel stations with a fuel cell? It would be daunting because we have 3,500 megawatts. To make installation in a fuel cell using a PEM cell, it's not practical. It's only tested on several megawatts. It's still not on the scale. So that means we need to reserve to combustion turbines. But as a combustion, you need the one ingredient, which is air. And what air has is a nitrogen. And when the nitrogen combusts, due to chemical reaction, it binds with the oxygen and produces NOx. And that is what we don't want to have. NOx is a pollution, local pollution. And then another component is CO2, of course. With the hydrogen, we are eliminating CO2, which is culprit of greenhouse gas and climate change. And power plants generally produce way more CO2. Fossil fuel is CH4. The largest molecule is a carbon, so that's why you're producing greenhouse gases. So with the hydrogen, we are eliminating causes of climate change, greenhouse gases, but we now have this conundrum of NOx. I do want to say that since beginning of my career, that was my job, to minimize NOx emission in the current fossil fuel plants. There is well-developed technologies to do that. You have it on your cars, but even more state-of-the-art technologies have been developed for the power plants. There's 2 ways to do it, within the combustion chamber and also when flue gases exit combustion system, there is a catalyst that scrub and eliminate that nitrogen. So, for example, our power plant that's just sitting here in a harbor measures less than 1 ppm. They're actually saying it's too clean. We cannot even kind of like run it. We cannot even measure it. And the reason is because DWP invested hundreds of millions of dollars to implement these technologies. To us, it's very important that our communities do not have NOx emission. The second part, how we're going to get rid of the CO2, is utilizing hydrogen. Hydrogen, you heard the measurements, what we use in a PEM or fuel cell. In the combustion to produce, let's say, in a 300 megawatts power plant, you need 18 tons an hour. So this is enormous amount, 18,000 kilograms of hydrogen, enormous amount of, by volume to be used in a power plants. So question is, where are we going to get it? When we worked with Department of Energy, that was, to me, the biggest challenge. We need to have an ecosystem of production, storage, and delivery developed that is sustainable. And once it's developed for power generation in those volumes, everybody else, like industry, refineries, cement plants, ports, will be smaller users, but we would be driving the ecosystem. We did partner with Department of Energy and State of California Governor's Office for development of hydrogen hub earlier in 2021. I don't remember anymore here, but we did get 1.2 billion to develop California hub that will benefit DWP ports and other industries. That is still in question if you're going to get that money, but that's not the. We need the federal support, we need the state support. But importance here is that longer we wait, the problem stays. There is a part of the industry that will be here, fossil fuel industry, that will be here to maintain our way of life, and it's for the necessities, but we need to make sure that we are converting it to carbon-free solutions like a hydrogen. Can everything be electrified? It's going to be difficult. We can electrify maybe 80% of our fossil fuel industry, especially light-duty vehicles, even trucking. But there is a situations like Matt explained that it's very challenging. And again, that dispatchable generation, I'm not claiming that combustion turbines are the only way. We have a nuclear, we have a geothermal, we have a hydro. But in Los Angeles, we don't have a nuclear. We can't build a nuclear in LA. We can't have hydro, we are in a desert, and we don't have a geothermal source. So we have to look at these other options. In the terms of development of ecosystem, we do have a power plant in Utah that right now it's built, it's commissioned, and does have a production system set in place. In Delta, Utah, we were so lucky, we didn't know about it, but we are sitting on natural salt caverns that are sizes of Empire State Building, 27 of them, where we can store hydrogen naturally, safely, and then utilize it when we need to combust in our generating stations. So we converted our coal. Coal is the worst for environment. We got rid of it and now build these hydrogen-capable units. And hydrogen, like Terry said, is easily converted using electrolyzers, utilizing excess renewable and the water rights that they have in Utah to convert to hydrogen and then use it when we need it. So that's the first, I think, largest in the world, but first for us. And I think we are trying to make sure that we continue with this new technology and accomplish that in LA as well, with the Scattergood project being first one.
Fantastic. And speaking of those salt caverns, another way to fill them is with natural hydrogen. If you had asked me 5 years ago, does hydrogen occur separately, naturally on Earth, I would have said no. You have to break it out of water, H2O, or out of fossil fuels. We get a lot of our hydrogen by putting steam through natural gas, that type of thing. And I would have been wrong. It turns out that there's a lot of natural hydrogen in the ground. There are wells being drilled today in Arizona and other parts of the West. It's already being used in West Africa. It was discovered there by accident. And I won't get into that because that's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But the beauty of that is you don't have to use energy to produce it. You need a little bit of energy to drill and get it out of the ground like you do natural gas. But it can be produced in Arizona. They're estimating for under $1 a kilogram. Of course, you then have to get it to the end user. But that makes it competitive with fossil fuel generated hydrogen and certainly competitive to diesel. Brian, I want to give you one more question before we turn it over to our audience. I hope you'll all be thinking about your questions because we're going to turn it over to you in a moment. I want to talk about safety, and I know that's a question that comes up with consumers and the people you deal with all the time. Is it safe? What about the Hindenburg? All that sort of thing. And one example of how safe it is, I want to point out the hydrogen-powered sushi cart back there right in front of the blue building, and the inventor is Takyoku. Raise your hand, Tak. There he is. Give him a great big round of applause. Tak is retired from Toyota, but when he was working there, he is the genius behind their 18-wheel truck, their Class 8 truck that runs on hydrogen with a fuel cell, and the fuel cell stack that Matt was talking about that can power heavy-duty equipment. In fact, I don't know whatever happened to that original design one. I want to get that in our exhibit area here someday. But in any event, he has now turned his attention to all of the food carts and food trucks that you see on the road that all have little generators that are noisy and polluting and burning gasoline. All of those could be replaced by a hydrogen fuel cell, and he'll tell you all about how there's a little tank of water on there, there's solar on the roof, the solar electrolyzes the water into hydrogen, and then the hydrogen powers the heat and the electricity and the lighting and everything needed for the food cart, which in this case is sushi. So a hydrogen-powered sushi cart shows you how safe and potentially useful hydrogen can be. But Brian, over to you to talk a little bit about safety.
Well, the question around hydrogen safety is interesting because, as you brought up, the Hindenburg comes to mind for so many people that was more than a generation before we were born. But this one, incident in a blimp that lived, I bet most of us, if we had to take a guess of what year that would be, couldn't even pick the year. But, the technology that went into that, oh, very good. All right. I should have asked Matt. The technology that went into that was, 100 years old. The cause of the fire there had very little to do with the fuel on board. And I think the key word in that statement is fuel. Any type of fuel that we use to store energy and then to deliver energy on demand is, by its very nature, volatile. And the question is, how do we control those risks? How do we manage that volatility, try to contain that volatility, and then use it to produce the energy that powers the world, literally powers everything around us. So whether we're talking about gasoline or batteries or hydrogen or natural gas, whatever it is, there are very important safety protocols that we have to develop, we have to learn about, we have to test these things and figure it out. So, the technology that goes into the Mirai over there isn't new. That technology's been around for a very long time. In fact, we use them in the space program. People in submarines, their lives rely on our ability to, safely manage electrolyzers or fuel cells or, whatever it may be in this ecosystem. So ultimately, the technology is mature, and we've been working on safety standards for this technology for many, many, many decades. And one thing I just realized that I think we should add to the exhibit here is maybe a display that kind of exhibits the hydrogen safety protocols that go into those tanks and the equipment on the car versus the safety protocols that go into, say, a gas tank on a traditional consumer vehicle or a battery for that matter. But if you look at a gas tank that's removed from a car, it's injection molded plastic that, we have some, basically plates of metal in between that and the road to keep things from jumping up and puncturing it. But you could basically take a screwdriver and punch a hole in a gas tank. And in that case, the gas then drops to the ground because of gravity, and it spreads out where it collects kind of the appropriate amount of air to reach this perfect air-fuel mixture so that it can combust from below. So these hydrogen tanks are held to a much different standard. They are tested, they mess with, I know they at some point took 50 caliber rifle bullets and shot these tanks from, not too far away and did all of these things to try to rupture a hydrogen tank, which is incredibly difficult. It's basically the strongest component on this vehicle. But the interesting thing is when you do manage to rupture a hydrogen tank, hydrogen, number one on the periodic table, is the lightest substance on Earth. By definition, it's the lightest substance on Earth. So it escapes into the atmosphere at about 35 miles an hour. So it literally, if there is a hydrogen escape, goes straight up faster than anything else that, any other element on the periodic table. So, we have taken a lot of measures to make sure there are hydrogen sensors both in the cars and the stations. The car has so many points of communication. TAC could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are thousands of points of communication between the car and a hydrogen dispenser when the car is fueling, versus, I imagine most people here have fueled a gasoline car. There's an old analog handle, and you pull the handle and it shoots gas out. And for those of us that have seen the movie Point Break, where he takes it out of the car and lights it up and is shooting fire in the air, like, this is not very sophisticated technology. It's just, we're so used to it, we're so desensitized to the fact that we use this every day, we don't really think about the safety standards around it. But thankfully, around the world of hydrogen technology, there have been thousands upon thousands of engineers, including TAC, who's put decades of his career into making sure that this is the safest possible technology that we can be using to still kind of contain this energy source and direct it to drive the world around us when we need it. So I'll finish this off, and I know I'm a little long-winded here. I've been driving solely hydrogen vehicles for 10 years, and it has never once been a concern of mine. I've never one time ever felt unsafe. In the 10 years that my wife and I have only been driving hydrogen vehicles here in California, I'm very privileged to be able to say I've been driving these vehicles for 10 years because they literally just came out about 10 years ago, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I've been delighted by the tech. I'm excited to see it evolve. I know there are so many new technologies right around the corner that are making them better and better, and I couldn't be more excited about the future of the tech, and I certainly couldn't be more comfortable with the safety of it.
Well, great, yes, great big round of applause there. Thank you. So let's have some questions or comments from the audience. We've got a roving microphone here. Please come on up and ask your questions of the panel. I'll point out, as Brian said, again, the Toyota Mirai that's on its side there, and you can see the caramel-colored tank, but right next to it is one of those tanks cut in half, so you can see how thick it is. And if you happen to have a screwdriver on you, feel free to bang on it and see if you can make a hole in it, because I can tell you you can't, but you can have your own demonstration. Go ahead, sir. Let us know who you are and what's your question.
Good morning. My name is Nader Lotfi, electrical engineer by training. Don't really know a whole lot about hydrogen, but let's say in the Los Angeles area, how many places where you can actually refill with hydrogen? I'm asking because I had a friend who bought a Mirai early on. I don't remember if it came out like 2017 or something, and then eventually had to sell it because he couldn't find enough places to refill. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian. That's your specialty.
So right now, statewide in California, we have about 55 hydrogen refueling stations. We have an executive order signed by Jerry Brown mandating 200 of them. We've allocated funding to build the 200 stations. So we still have a few more to build. I think if we got to a point where we had about 1,000 stations here, that would be a critical mass that would allow pretty much anyone to go about their daily lives driving a fuel cell electric vehicle without really having to worry about their ability to refuel. Now, ultimately, all of those stations aren't online right now because there have been parts of the ecosystem where we have had to develop new technologies and safety standards to make sure that the dispensers, which we know work very well, and the cars, which we know work very well, can continue working. And so some of those parts of the supply chain include the trailers that take hydrogen from where it's produced to be able to put it at the station. Just like you see gasoline tankers on the road, pretty much anytime you're ever on the highway, they have to take the gas to the station. They put it in a big underground tank. The station uses that to pull up the dispensers. And we have a similar method for hydrogen tech. But we did not have a lot of different companies that made hydrogen trailers when we first started opening these stations. And we quickly realized that the ecosystem is only as strong as its weakest link. And to give you another example of that, or a couple of examples of that, there was no protocol on the planet for a consumer to swipe a credit card and buy a kilogram of hydrogen, of a gaseous fuel in the United States of America, much less anywhere else, and actually make sure that our Department of Weights and Measures could assure that you are actually receiving a kilogram of hydrogen. So we had to work with the credit card companies. We had to work with the companies that made the actual credit card processing equipment to then communicate with a brand new dispenser that had never existed anywhere else in the world, to then tell the dispenser, okay, this person paid, let's go ahead and give them some fuel. And then we didn't have enough nozzles for those dispensers for the longest time. There was one company in Austria that made like 30 nozzles a year. They cost like $30,000 a piece. They were very fragile, so if somebody dropped it and the nozzle was broken, you had to wait like 6 months for somebody else in Austria to hand make a new nozzle. So these other industries have had to pop up around this ecosystem, which again is only 10 years old, to try to make sure that it is as resilient as possible, as safe as possible, and as efficient as possible. So that's a long-winded way of saying we have 55 fueling stations right now. We're on our way to more. It's a slow process because it's the first time this has ever really been done before. And there have just been hurdles like, again, trying to educate ourselves here in the U.S. about kilograms of hydrogen and why we're not using gallons and, basically the whole concept of gaseous fuels. So it's been a little bit of a slow process, but I'm very excited about the path ahead. I think, we're over the hardest part now, and really just candidly, we just have to figure out how to pay for it until the market can take it on and it's cheap enough to just kind of take on a life of its own.
So the moral of the story there is if you want to make a lot of money, go into the hydrogen nozzle business. But that's great. Other questions? Come on up, use the mic. Yep, sure, go ahead.
Richard Havenek, formerly I'm on the board of the Harbor Community Benefits Foundation, which is a part of receiving the EPA grant. I say, Brian, if you're long-winded, let the wind blow, brother. Because the hurdle I found in hydrogen, and thank you, Robin. Thanks. She's heard me rattle on and complain, Terry. And thanks to Jenny Crusoe, too. But anyway, all the people at AltaSea that make this happen. Brian, safety. Appears that over the years, not just the past couple, but for a few years, is some misinformation around the safety of hydrogen, and there's a fear that has taken hold to such an extent that there's opposition. And there is a motivation to go towards electrifying the grid without understanding the challenges of supplying the grid. So thank you, and I'm looking for momentum on that. Some more wind, let it blow.
That's great. Thank you, Richard.
And so on the power, the challenges to the power, I hear you. And then so to go a little bit nerdy here and self-interested, there's a lining up. There's the challenges around propulsion, shipping, the alternative fuels. There's a thread that possibly is weaving, and it may involve mixing hydrogen with natural gas through existing infrastructure. It may involve hydrogen with e-methanol production. Hydrogen is actually becoming more common as an element to solutions. So on the power, the generation of power, and the mentioning of you said, Nermina, thank you, or doctor, or head person. You mentioned the SCR, the catalytic reduction in the combustions. You didn't. I'm hoping to hear about not in combustion. That was in the exhaust. But in combustion, there's another method. It may be lower pressure of the hydrogen, but also is related to natural gas and microgrids, because the same thing applies to natural gas and applies to e-methanol in low pressure SCRs and exhaust gas circulation. I told you it was a little bit nerdy, but it's not that nerdy. So on that thread, microgrids, DWP, SCE, our future, and on mixing gases to supply the grid with the power we need and with the fuel cells we need possibly in microgrids also.
Thanks, Richard. Nermina, you want to just talk about that, about blending?
I do. When we started looking at the hydrogen application, DWP, we actually worked very closely with European partners because there are 10 years ahead of us in terms of the studies and analysis, how hydrogen can be utilized mixed with the natural gas. Could the same pipelines for natural gas be converted to hydrogen and so forth? There is a limitations, how much we can do the blending in existing pipeline of natural gas and hydrogen. Volumetrically, they're different, and also due to properties of the hydrogen, utilizing same type of pipelines as natural gas, there is a potential of embrittlement. So up to 20% we are okay to mix. After that, hydrogen will need its own existing pipelines, just due to chemical properties of the element. But even 20, even 5, 10, 20, what that means, you are pushing that molecule of carbon out of the system. And that's the whole point, decarbonization, right? So it's very attractive from that standpoint. The machines that will be utilizing it in a power, they're ready right now up to 30%. Anything beyond, there is some infrastructure changes that would be required, again, because you need more volume of hydrogen. It has a density that's much larger than the natural gas. So there is some technological challenges, but up to 20 is very, very attractive.
Fantastic. Well, in the interest of time, we're going to wrap up. I know our panelists will stay after and just take individual questions and talk with you about their expertise. But to wrap up, I want to ask one last question of each of you. Matt, and this will be the same sort of question. You've envisioned a future with hydrogen in your industry. Nermina, you too. Obviously, Brian, you as well, especially with consumer cars, light duty, heavy duty. What is the year, or how many years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, will it be for hydrogen, the view that you have, the dream you have for hydrogen, to become mainstream?
2040 for me. And my dream is this. I have a pipe of low-pressure hydrogen coming out of the ground at my terminal that I can do whatever I want with. I can compress it and fuel stuff. Yeah, like that is 2040, I think, is when that happens.
So less than 15 years. Great. Nermina?
Me has to be our LADWP's LA100 plan, which is 2035, to decarbonize 100% by 2035. That is like 9 years from now.
Yep.
It's unfathomable that we would have all our generation converted to hydrogen, especially because what I talked about, the volumes that we would need, that hydrogen needs to be produced, stored, and also delivered via a pipeline system. But I'm very hopeful. If we are getting to work, like I said, we already have a power plant in Utah. We're already working on a scattergood here in LA. And we are working with our partners like Port of Los Angeles and others, producers nearby, like in Lancaster, that are looking at how to scale it up, that we can meet our goals. So 2035 for me.
All right, that's less than 10 years. Brian, last word.
All right, I've got a two-part answer to that question. I think it became mainstream the first time a consumer could drive up to a hydrogen fueling station and swipe a Visa or MasterCard and refuel a car that they just drove off a dealer lot. I think it's been mainstream for 10 years. Now, I think we'd like to see a lot more adoption. We'd like to see economies of scale. We'd love to see it persist into many other areas of the economy and the energy ecosystem. So on that note, I think by 2035, where we have a mandate that heavy-duty trucks in California need to be zero emission, we can't do that with batteries alone. Hydrogen will have to be a part of that ecosystem. It's a huge challenge. We don't have a lot of time left to decarbonize with 20,000 drayage trucks here at the two ports alone, much less every truck that's driving throughout California. So if we want to achieve that goal in 2035, which in some ways we really have to achieve that goal, hydrogen will absolutely have to be a part of that.
Fantastic. Well, please give a great round of applause for our panelists. Great job. And just a couple of other quick announcements before I let you go to visit with all of our partners here. We have right behind us as well the exhibits from our internship class. 30 students did some amazing projects. Please go back there and take a look at those. Those are exciting. Today, also very exciting, is the last day of early bird ticket sales for our Blue Hour event, which is October 10th. It's the best party in the world, or definitely in Pedro, with blue foods of celebrity chefs, with lots of fun stuff, no stuffy tables and sit down and all that. It's enjoy the warehouse, enjoy the water, enjoy some friends. So October 10th, tickets on sale. And then please volunteer or go take a look at the swag you can buy or become a member of Resiliency. Buy the swag because it looks good, but also to help this cause, help our education programs, and so on. And finally, our next open house is Saturday, September 12th, when we will celebrate the Momat Ahiko, the amazing Tiat canoe that you see over there that Dominic spoke about. There will be ceremonies formally welcoming her here and talking more about that program I mentioned about the woodworking for the next generation. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. Our future is blue.